Hello Year 10 Mathematics Stage 5.3 students. Today we're continuing on with the topic of probability and we're learning about relative frequency. So relative frequency is calculated when an experiment is performed. The frequency of an event is the number of times the event occurred in the experiment. Relative frequency is the frequency of the event divided by the total number of frequencies. It is also known as experimental probability, as it estimates the chances of something happening or the probability of an event. Relative frequency is expressed using fractions, decimals, or percentages. So we use this formula here when we're talking about relative frequency. In a whole, relative frequency is just experimental probability. So relative frequency equals the frequency of the data value over the total number of data values, which equals F over N. So we're just going to have a look at one example today. So an experiment of tossing 2 coins was completed and the number of heads recorded in the frequency table shown. We want to find the relative frequency of obtaining the following number of heads. So we want to find 0 heads, 1 head, and 2 heads. So what we need to do is we need to work out the relative frequency. So how we perform this, or how we find relative frequency, is so the relative frequency of, so we're going to say RF of 0 equals the number of zeros we toss, which is 100, over the total number of coins that we tossed, or how many times, the total frequency. So to find this, we need to add our 100, our 192, and our 108 together. And when we do this, we get 400. So our relative frequency of 0 is 100 over 400, which when we plug that into our calculator, that simplifies down to a quarter, which simplifies down to 0.25 as a decimal. So we're going to write it up in our box as a decimal today. Some of the questions that you do will ask it for you as a fraction, as a decimal, or as a percentage. So if we wanted to get this as a percentage, so to get it as a percentage, what we do is we get our decimal of 0.25 and we times it by 100. So we'll get 25%. Okay, part B, we want to find the relative frequency of obtaining the following number of heads. We want to find 1. So the relative frequency of 1 head will be 192 over our 400. So we can plug that into our calculator. And when we do so, we get 12 over 25 as our fraction. As our decimal, so you just hit your S to D button, we get 0.4948. So then as our percentage, we get 0.48 times 100, which equals 48%. And we're going to keep our decimals going over here by filling in our table. So then we want to find the relative frequency of attaining 2 heads. So we have our relative frequency of 2 heads, which equals 108 was our frequency over our total of 400. So when we put that into our calculator, we get 27 over 100. So as a decimal, that is 0.27. So as a percentage, that is 0.27 times 100, which equals 27%. So the relative frequency of getting 2 is 0.27. Now, once we finish this, we should be able to add our relative frequencies all up together, just to double check that we get this correct, and it should equal to 1. So when we add these all together, we get 1, and that means that you have correctly found the relative frequency of your outcomes.